Hello, hello, welcome to the Stream of Truth.
Hello, welcome. I am Dr. Tassel Faith Shamebrook,
And I'm Sean Kelly.
and today we have a gold mine of a topic to share. How to communicate like a master
Like a
and
boss.
like a boss. And these have been very hard-earned learnings for Sean and I, and a lot of these learnings have really developed through our personal interactions. I think probably we knew a lot of them beforehand, but some of them are new, and some of them have just been good through, in a way, through our own trauma,
Yeah,
our
yeah.
own conversational trauma. I'm gonna. That feels very appropriate. You and I think lots of different people in their relationships, we go through conversational trauma at times.
Yeah, yeah. Usually when it's really important, I think, for us to remember that even people like us who are sort of constantly thinking about these things, constantly trying to do better and just constantly very aware of all of it, and I
Yes.
we still get off track a little bit, and you know don't notice when we're um
Going
perhaps not.
unconscious
Yeah,
or
we're not totally aware of what we're doing sometimes.
yeah.
It
And I'll just
can happen to
say,
anyone.
I I have a PhD in psychotherapy, communication, marriage and family therapy is part of what I studied.
Yeah.
So I professionally might be considered an expert in communication and in relationships, but in my own personal life, there's still a lot for me to learn, and I still make many mistakes, and there's still just so much expansion for me
And
here.
I think too, like when we sort of feel like we're experts a little bit um in these things, like I of course didn't go to school for this, but I feel my soul knows these things, sort of, if the best way that I could
Yes.
describe it. And I have
Yeah.
a remembrance, a wisdom that seems to
Yes.
have just blossomed into my being.
Yeah.
And, didn't really have much concept of any of this stuff before, but then suddenly was quite aware of it and quite remembering of it. Like we can feel like, I think, that we know best a lot of times. And then that can get in the way of our sort of humility in the moment, which helps us to notice that we maybe aren't taking our own advices and stuff. Like we're not, we trust, also we trust ourselves a lot, and we respect our feelings and our sovereignty and our, and we're empowered. And so it can be challenging then to go back and go, oh, maybe I'm being challenging. Maybe being challenging here. Or maybe I'm contributing this and stuff like that.
I love that you use the word humility. I was thinking the exact same word. I was thinking of this orientation of humility, of being humble, of realizing we're all students in every aspect of our lives. We
Yeah.
of course we're on the road to mastery, but mastery is sort of an infinite path.
Yeah.
And I think yeah, I'll just say, I think for me, I think I have a bit of an identity that, oh, I'm a really good communicator.
And you
I'm
are
really and
generally,
and
right?
and often I am,
Yeah.
but I think it's great to just have this orientation of there's always something more for me to learn. There's always something more for me to do better. And actually I want to add another tip. We have 8 tips, 8 tips we're going to share today, but I think a ninth tip, we'll talk about it more, but is self-reflection. It's after every difficult conversational interaction, just forget about what the other person did or didn't do,
Yeah.
just the self-reflection. Oh my goodness, what can I do better? What did I learn about
I
myself
actually think
that I
self-reflection is like one of the most important
it's
things we can
probably
do.
maybe
Uh,
we'll maybe that'll be tip number one.
maybe let's just call that
Maybe
tip
we'll
number
start with
one.
that. Yeah.
And like basically developing a process that works for you, wherein and I try to do this, and I do a pretty decent job of it. I think of constantly evaluating not only why I'm saying what I'm saying or what I'm doing, or whether or not what I've done is problematic in some way, or was I not being humble, or was I, being selfish, or, directly trying to very honestly assess everything that I do. But I also do that with my thoughts and my emotions as well. And I try to do it. And what I recommend doing, if you can, is doing that moment to moment as much as possible. And, it requires a certain level of patience and presence, and then also a sort of an honesty, a self-honesty that isn't always the easiest for us to do, because we'd rather usually look at the things and traits we enjoy about ourselves, and we'd rather not see so much of the parts of us that are still, much like, sort of immature a bit, or, lacking some of the wisdoms that we generally hold and stuff. So when
Yes.
we, yeah.
And I think that really connects in with this illusion that we can be in, that we're supposed to be perfect.
Yeah.
That there's something wrong if we notice, oh, I would like to do something a little bit differently, a little bit better next time. That we hold ourselves to such high standards when we're all just here learning, expanding, growing. And
Yeah.
I think one of the tips we'll talk about more later on is blanket of grace. Blanket of grace for what I have done and how I have acted, and for my partner.
I'd like to say that something a little weird, a little esoteric, but
Mm-hmm.
one of the most difficult things that a human can do is honestly see themselves. And
Yeah.
in the Law of One, Ra basically says that, humans have died from the shock of seeing themselves when they were initiated in the temples or in pyramids and things like that. That the shock and emotional pain, basically that's what it is, emotional pain, emotional scarring that comes up, has caused the body to die in some cases.
Wow.
And now that was very extreme. That's done in isolation inside of the pyramid and the Queen's Chamber positions, and usually with a guide or a teacher of some sort that would assist in connecting the individual to themselves. And what basically happens is when we see our own illusion of some kind, or our own confusion or whatever, it just hurts us a lot. And so we have to sort of get used to that feeling a bit and embrace it.
Yeah, I love that. One of my favorite phrases is becoming comfortable with feeling uncomfortable.
Right. Yeah.
Whether we're out of our comfort zone in our career or in a relationship. But I love what you just said, that, to be more comfortable with seeing our own shadow, our own wounds, our own patterns that we'd like to shift.
And it's ideal and nice to say. And, basically all I think we're advocating is trying to hold that stance.
Yes.
Like, you're going to likely not be able to, right? And there's times where basically you're going to notice that you're sort of BSing yourself. But it's going to be just a mere blip of a moment and then you turn to the story that reinforces the belief, and turn away from the truth that you usually got a little glimpse of, but then turned away from it and then sort of put it out of your mind. And it's like a instinctual sort of avoidance a little bit that comes up, and we all do it. And you could try to understand as well that it's sort of perfect. So you can trust yourself to notice the stuff about yourself in the right timing as well. So,
Yes, just
you know,
yes, exactly. Just trust the path that your soul is on.
uh,
Yeah.
good morning, everyone. Sorry, Angelic. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Angelic asked if it was the temples up the Nile River. I was talking about the Pyramids of Giza. They were used for what's called initiation, and they would isolate people into those, and then in that state of deep meditation and introspection, they would see themselves. But they would see themselves with a sort of veracity and force that, in some cases, caused the people to get shocked, have heart attacks and things. So
yeah. So in this first tip that we're talking about of how to communicate like a master, if things don't go great in a conversation, particularly with a partner, we're talking about self-reflection. Really almost just debriefing with yourself. What did I do? How can I do better? And I want to just say here, because we're talking about how sometimes this can be really painful to see ourselves. So what I want to say here is this orientation of unconditional acceptance for yourself, unconditional acceptance for your conscious partner. And we've talked a lot about that's something we hold with each other, that we unconditionally accept the other person and all of their behavior.
yeah.
And then also just really tuning into our own ability to unconditionally accept ourselves in the same way that spirit does.
Yes,
so this,
totally.
This God consciousness of unconditional love and acceptance towards ourselves and towards our partner. So that can just really help to not beat up on ourselves or to beat up on our partners when we've had a really difficult conversation.
Totally. And that's sort of one of the ways we can notice that something's being a little bit off sometimes. Like, if the partnership is built on a foundation of trust and acceptance and love, and it's not a partnership that's based in, a lot of sort of unconscious behavior from both people that, then there's usually like indicators that we're in a bit of confusion. Like usually when we're sort of framing in our mind, like the other person did this and that's the issue.
Right.
Then we're usually like in a story.
Yes.
And we don't usually. So I guess this is the first point that you wrote, which I really like. Stick to the facts, ma'am.
Yeah.
So I guess this is the first tip. So is that okay for me to get started into that?
Yeah, absolutely.
So basically that a lot of times when we're like, oh, here's what they did, we think we know what they did. Like if we're honest, we do think we know what they've done. We do think we know an idea of their orientation, an idea of maybe their intentions and things like that. A lot of times though, we don't actually know, and we are basing all of that information on our past experience with other people or even with the same person, right? Mm-hmm. In the past they've done this or this and said this and that, and these situations have occurred, and so it must be repeating itself. And sometimes, of course, that can be true. So it's important to be very objective as you can, and stick to like you said, what happened, like what truthfully happened, what were the sequence of events, not what do I think they're thinking about this, what do I think their intention is. Like unless they've expressed to you their intention, you don't really know what they're trying to do, right? You're really guessing. And I think that's one of the biggest things. And so one of the things that we were talking about was we talk about the Imago technique a bunch. And a lot of the Imago technique's great because it helps everyone understand each other's experience. But we're thinking there's another layer there, which is where we talk of intention and like what the motivations are for what people are doing. Why are we acting the way we acted? Like, what is our goal there? That type of thing. To help clear up what ends up happening with both having sort of negative experiences is we're like, here's all the ways that I got upset. And then the other person's like, here's all the ways I got upset. And then we're like, okay. But it doesn't help to clear up the narratives that helped people get to their upset points, right? So we want to observe some of the stories that we have that we do that. We tend to know about that ourselves, but we don't always realize that we're in them when we're in them is part of it, right? So,
and basically one of the huge benefits of relationship, and especially a really intimate relationship, is our stories are going to come out through these interactions, and we'll be able to see them. So it's such a gift. So I wonder if it might be helpful as we go through these tips to first just lay out a little bit of what happened between us. So we have like the example, because especially with the stick to the facts, I'd like to use a real example. So maybe I'll just back up for a minute and quickly describe what happened between us.
Sure.
And I'm embarrassed. But I'm gonna own this.
I don't think you should be embarrassed. I think that's part of our point. Is like this is it's fine, you know.
Yeah, part of what I want to share is it's okay that we have these old stories. We'll try to get rid of them.
Yeah, we're people. We had stuff happen to us.
Just to admit that we have some wounds and stories.
Things happened and we got hurt, and some of that's still with us, right?
Yeah, exactly.
That's perfect.
So this past Saturday night, what happened was Friday, we had talked about you calling me on Saturday night. You have your kids on the weekends, so we don't usually interact much on the weekends. And I have said that that's kind of hard for me to not have any contact. And so we talked about, I'll call on Saturday night. So, so it's all so dramatic. It felt so dramatic in the moment. So Saturday night, it was about 11 my time, and Sean hadn't called yet. And here's problem number one. I made an assumption that you were not going to call. So I was assuming. I was making an ass out of you and me. So it's 11 o'clock. I assumed he was not going to call. And then I felt sad.
To be fair, it was a little late. I normally probably would have called by then.
Normally you would have called. So
yeah.
Okay, but so this is another interesting point. Like, my assumption was somewhat evidence-based, because usually you would call, but I still was assuming. Even, you know. So like, be careful of evidence, past evidence. You still might be incorrect.
I would actually almost recommend you don't pay too much attention to evidence at all.
No. It's just the thinking mind wants like order and organization, and this is how things work. And so it wants to rely on evidence. Okay. 11 o'clock, you hadn't called yet. I assumed you weren't going to call. Then I felt sad, and I felt sad because, we had talked about this.
I specifically asked him.
I told him it was important. I felt very vulnerable and a little bit almost embarrassed in a way, like that it was so important to me. I felt embarrassed about that. It had felt very vulnerable for me to ask you that. And so just all that came up, and I was like, I just felt really sad. So I texted you, basically, good night. I love you. I feel sad that we didn't talk today. And then about an hour later, I guess it's a bit after midnight, my time, you texted me. I intended to call you. It was my intention to call you. I was basically waiting for my oldest son to go to bed, because basically we have like a schedule thing, and I wanted to have more time. Right. Okay. you said something like, I could only have talked to you for a few minutes unless he had gone to bed. Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. So then I'm off and running. I am off and running having read this, because I've got a lot of wounds and stories around being with a partner who I felt was putting like his children ahead of our relationship in a way that didn't feel highest and best, or like sort of respectful or helpful to the relationship. So I existed in my marriage. There was a lot of issues around that. So reading your text, I went right into that story and those wounds of, oh, look, it's happening again. It's happening again. Red light, you know, red flag, red flag. So I went all into that story. And then, okay, so that was, I would say, you know, mistake or not the best behavior, number 2. And then number 3, not best behavior, I started texting you about the story I was holding.
Yeah, basically everything that was coming up and how you're feeling in the moment and all of that.
Yes. I basically was telling you my story. Like, it feels like you're, you know, not partnering with me. It feels like we can't talk because of this and that. And so just to rewind, partly because I want to get it straight, my first sort of misstep was I made an assumption that you weren't going to call. Second misstep is I somewhat unconsciously went into an old story about what was happening. And third misstep, I started texting you all of it. And we've realized texting these types of things that could be difficult to hear and difficult to talk about and triggering is no bueno. Not the best way to communicate. Not communicating like a master. That's not masterful communication.
Yeah.
Okay, so those were I would say my 3 missteps.
Yeah, and on my side, I had missteps as well. But you know, I don't want to sound judgy or anything, but I was quite aware of what was happening on my side, and I didn't know how to approach it. I wasn't totally aware of what was happening. I was just, because everything that was being said was not at all my reality, and like I couldn't even find parts of me that thought this way or like, yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So I was like, this is just, for me at least, it's just not real. Like, it's not happening at all like this. So I knew that it was these stories, but what I didn't know was, how do I help get through this? And you know, and then also it was we said this before, but it was like this sort of a perfect storm, because I had my children, I was busy. I don't really have the space to, like, she sent a bunch of texts, and that's okay. I don't ever mind, right? I like to have the text. When she wants to say stuff, I want to hear it. So we've always said to each other, don't hold back. Like, it's fine to ramble and whatever too, right? There's no issue with any of that. But I was busy in the morning, so I'm like not really having a ton of space to even read them.
And usually we would say good morning to each other, and that
right.
Didn't happen.
And because the text, the way they like landed with me, I was like, whoa, I basically totally threw me off, and I didn't say good morning. So this added further to this idea that I was like not into things the way that maybe Tassel was, right? That I'm like, or withdrawing as well, right? Like pulling away, like.
Well, and that's sort of just, you know, part of what we want to say is, ideally, even when there's something really difficult, to not pull away, because this can be very difficult for the communication. So that's something that we've experienced quite a bit. So
totally
was difficult for me.
And yeah, and so when I was actually writing like a little note to send, because I wasn't able to call because I had my little children. When I'm with my little children, it's kind of crazy. And you know, I wanted to be able to give it the attention that it deserved. And so I was writing like a little note, but it was taking me a long time because of how busy I was. So, and also because I was being very careful how I was constructing it too. Like, so it was taking me forever. And then on Tassel's side, she's like, what is going on? He's ignoring me. Right. And, you know, so it just, you could see how it all spirals.
Yeah, it just was sort of a perfect storm of not the best communication on each one of our sides. And so just to back up to this point number 2 we're making about stick to the facts. This was such a great initiation for me to really stick to the facts. The only facts were, we had talked about you calling me. It was now 11 o'clock. It was late. You had not yet called, and I felt sad. Those were the bare bones of what was happening. And then what my thinking mind did was just, I have story templates from my past. And these facts seem like they could fit into a story template of he's not, you know, like responding to me. He's putting other people first. There's no space for me in our relationship with his kids. That's a story that I lived in some other relationships. So I just took these few facts and I put them right into an old story. And then I was off and running.
Yeah.
And then you read the story that I've concocted and you're thinking, this is not my story. This is not what happened on my side. And you're realizing that I'm in a story. So I would just say, like, if we can catch ourselves, so I was in pain. I was feeling sad. I was feeling not responded to. I was feeling not important to you. Very painful feelings, right? Yep. It's very painful.
And I wanted to say too that it's very normal because the mind like is conditioned to understand as much as it can. And so whenever there are ties or things that are similar to other experiences, the mind goes, oh, okay, I know this, and let's fill in some of these gaps so that I can make this false sense of understanding or this false sense of knowing why is this happening. And that's the trick, is that it's a false sense. It helps the mind feel like it understands what's occurring.
Exactly, because what's happening is the sad, painful feelings are super uncomfortable. And the story is a distraction. The story is, this is happening because he's doing this. And it takes you a bit away from your own pain.
Yeah, so exactly.
The masterful orientation would be, okay, something is happening. I don't know exactly what is happening. I only know these few facts and I am feeling pain. I guess I'm just going to sit in the whatever I'm feeling, and then we'll eventually talk about it.
Yeah.
So what the invitation for me really was, okay, you're feeling some sadness and you're feeling kind of not responded to. Well, just feel that. Just feel it. That's what's there. Just feel it. And then at some point we'll talk about it.
And you mentioned it felt very dramatic, very, you know, it was got very challenging, very quick, I think, right? Very dramatic. And
because of all the old pain and wounds that I've experienced with this.
That's what I was going to say, just for everyone, like the more dramatic it feels, you know, like
most likely you're tapping into a lot.
This is not a positive
stuff.
Frequency of consciousness that you're in. When it's feeling dramatic and painful and all that, you know, it's not a positive, expanding, loving thing. Either you're upset with yourself or you're upset with somebody else's behavior or whatever it is. But it's all if it feels really, really dramatic, then it's you're in the middle of a narrative of some kind.
And what I want to really emphasize here is the pain is to be honored.
It's very real.
So what happened was I basically had a catalyst that showed me, oh, Tassel, you have a lot of unresolved pain around experiences where it felt like people were putting other people before you, or not, that you didn't matter. So it's just showing us our shadow.
It's a very typical pain as well. I mean, most of us have some form of this where we feel put aside in some way from other people, right?
Yes.
Whether it's our parents or lovers or whatever it is.
And so when these situations arise, it's all very nuanced. Like,
it is.
Stick to the facts, feel whatever there is to feel. And if you can, have the larger perspective that this is a catalyst for me. This is actually something really beneficial for me. I'm seeing now my own pain around these experiences. See if you can feel the feelings and move it through you, and sort of integrate those wounds. And most likely you won't even attract similar situations after that. And realize it's about you, basically. Realize what's happening is about you. And then at some point you will talk to your person and figure things out.
Yeah. And if you look at the facts, facts and you see that objectively speaking, the truth is that I haven't really been treated well here, right? Like, that can also be the truth, right? If somebody has done stuff that is just not, so for example, the evidence you had was that it was later than normal for me to call. So it is very understandable that you would think, oh, he's not calling me. I asked him to. That would be sort of a misbehavior, I guess, on my part. It would be unfair of me to commit to doing something you asked me to do and said was important, and then not do it, right?
And maybe
that's not me showing up for you.
Yeah, and maybe, next time it would be great if it's getting really late to just text me and say, like,
exactly,
I can't call, or just like.
And we could have sort of identified that right in the beginning and figured that out. And the only reason I didn't do those things is because I had no idea how late it was. I put my phone down and was with my son watching TV and eating cheese crackers. So I was like in my own little thing with him, and I just didn't realize how late it was. There's no clock in the room or anything. So I only say that because sometimes you'll look at, what the facts are, and sometimes the person's done something that's hurtful and really actually is, a painful thing. But sometimes it's painful, like, just objectively speaking, it hurts because it's a sort of form of abuse or mistreatment. Other times it feels bad because of our thoughts around what their intention was or their orientation around it. And so we can try to distinguish between those when we're looking at the sort of objective truth. Like, did he not call because he didn't want to? He just didn't care? Or did he not call because he's a weird dude who loses track of time constantly? And, these types of things, right? And so you can see the difference between the two. Of course, I intended on doing what I said I would do, and was even thinking about it right before all this happened, and was opening my phone to call when I saw the message that she was going to sleep. So, but you said as well that the feelings themselves, they have to be honored. They're real. The feelings are responses to the old story, and the story itself may not be occurring right now, but the story did occur. And the feelings around all that are very real. And
Exactly.
and that's why I had so much trouble. Like, what do I do with this? Because I researched gaslighting for hours and hours, because I'm like, I don't want to gaslight. I don't want to tell her that her experience is wrong. But I also want to say this, you're in a narrative, and I want to be supportive as well on how to help come out of it. And I was very
so
difficult for me.
Maybe let's just go down to the tip of helping your partner if they're struggling. So this is what you're talking about. So I would just caution, it's probably not the best path when your partner is in their story to say you're in a story.
Probably not.
And that is a bit what you were doing with me with
Probably,
the
yeah.
next day, which contributed to like
That's why I looked up gaslighting and stuff, and I was like, oh, you know, I'm kind of denying her experience to her.
Yeah, so
you know, it's
I want to say is what I experienced like was real. Like
totally.
I was in a story, but what I experienced was still real. What happened was real to me.
Totally.
So I believe the most helpful thing we can do in any conversation is always hold space for the other person to just share their experience. And as they're sharing their experience, most likely they will eventually start to unravel it and eventually have their own awareness of it.
That's basically what happened. That's basically what I did. Eventually, I was like, you know, I got to stop interjecting. I'll just let her share everything. And I did that. I think I did that for a little while, right?
Yeah. And this even lines up with the way that sort of modernist psychotherapy and more postmodern psychotherapy is. I'll just say this super quickly, like therapist client, more old school psychotherapy is I'm going to tell you what's wrong with you and how you need to change. I'm the expert. I will tell you. And more progressive, humane psychotherapy that I would practice is I'm not an expert. You are the expert in your life. I'm going to just let you talk. I'm going to let you express. I'm going to let you unravel. And this is what happens all the time. I'm just holding space with clients. They always figure things out themselves. So same thing in any type of conversation with an intimate partner or anyone else. It is not going to go well if we're going to impose anything on someone else. Like you're in a story, you're wrong. This did not happen. Oh, that.
And the challenge on the receiving side is that it feels like you're being attacked a little bit. Sometimes it kind of feels like they're making sort of claims of your character or of your intentions and things that are not necessarily real to you. So it can feel a lot like I need to stop this. And so you can get very uncomfortable with that and want to stop it. And so, you know, part of it is like you want them to feel better, but you also are feeling bad because it feels, you know, I think what I said to you is it felt like I'm not being seen here. I'm trying to show up, but not being seen. And so, you know, like you said, holding the space is the best thing I think you can do, but that can be challenging too.
Yeah. And so what was happening between us on Sunday, the next day, is you were, I think, having a hard time because you felt very attacked by me in my story. And I was having a really hard time as well. Not even so much from what happened with the story, but because you seemed to be withdrawing. And I was saying things like, can we lean into each other? Can we talk this out? Can we just be friends? And to me, it felt like that was not possible. The worst part was I felt like you were not my friend. In the way you had, it felt like you had withdrew, and then the way you ended up speaking to me when we did finally talk, it was you were very, very distant. I would say you seemed very, very angry, and this is another point here about to see if you can always maintain some type of bridge with your partner, no matter what the potentially chaotic, very difficult situation might be happening. Mm-hmm. And this is, I think, what was very difficult for us in this overall interaction is to me at least, it felt like our bridge had collapsed. It felt like there wasn't a bridge. I felt like we weren't friends. I guess because it was just such a painful experience for both of us. It felt like, that's what it felt like. It just felt like that we weren't connected at all. for a bit of time there.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just these situations can be really intense.
Yeah.
And I think it is also okay to take a time out, but to take a time out with the bridge. So I'll just say, at one point you hung up on me when we were on the phone. And again, that type of interaction is like the bridge is collapsed. We're hanging up on each other. We're not leaving things with some peace. So if we need to take a time out, if we need to stop talking, to try to do that with connection. Something like, if it's possible, like, I am so upset right now. I know you are so upset right now. At the same time, I love you. And I think we can get through this. But I just need a break right now until I feel better, until I'm more grounded. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I think that I'm not going to get into all the things that happened or why I hung up or anything, but what I'll say is that when somebody is in like a narrative, whether it's what tends to happen is the other person tends to come into their narratives. They tend to get triggered into their stories too.
Right.
So
right.
It tends to be a two-way thing. This ensures that there's more efficient learning happening from like the higher self perspective. So, basically when everyone's feeling like garbage, it's hard to speak in the way that you suggested, right? It's challenging. And
it is.
It's sort of like, it can feel very unsafe depending on what the stories are, what's going on. It can feel very unsafe to even put yourself out, because you have to put your heart out there to say that, right? Because what if they say never mind, right? Or whatever, I don't care, or they get rude to you about that too or something. So even just saying, I love you, we can get through this, is also a little vulnerable and difficult to say. But I do think that that's kind of the way we're going. We talked about it the other day about keeping our heart open.
Yes.
The issue is when we have stories and then other stories, and then both hearts start to close, and then the opportunity for that openness is gone. So when that's gone, I think the best thing to do is realize that try to realize what's going on. I don't think realistically when we're in that state that we'll be able to speak in those ways. So, well, even if one does, the other one won't necessarily hear it.
I just want to hold that as...
I think that is the goal, though.
The ideal.
I think it is the ideal. The ideal is to not... Yeah.
And I would say that I feel one of the things that I'm decent at is holding that with you. Maybe not every moment, but
yeah,
I think
generally, totally.
I tend to, even when things are really tricky, I'm still very much like, let's lean in together. Let's talk, we can work it out. So I do think it is absolutely possible for both people to hold that orientation. And I really think that's the crucial orientation.
Well, I'll share my story though, just a little bit. Like the story that comes up for me is people disappear. They get upset with me and then they just disappear. And they, and they don't even tell me what's going on half the time.
Yeah.
So, and that's been like my story. So when people are upset with me, and especially when I'm like, I don't know what I've done here, or like, I don't feel it the way that they're experiencing it, or that type of thing. I'm like, oh my God, they're basically creating this thing and then they're going to just leave. So I start to prepare for that, basically, almost instinctually. I start to prepare emotionally, energetically, for them to abandon me again. It's the same pains from the past that like come into this moment. And then I'm like, well, if they leave, then I'll have to just pick up and continue on. And, if they leave, okay, I guess. And I start to have these types of conversations with myself. And so it becomes really challenging for me on my side to open and come back, because that seems terrifying to do, I guess. And a lot of the response is, quite unconscious. I'm not so present. I'm not very like aware. So yeah, I do think the goal is to open up the heart, to not go into those states. And I think that's what we're sort of talking about is like, I think some of us can be in a sad state and have an open heart, and others of us are in a sad state, but then we close our heart down. It's different, I think, for everybody. And people respond to different types of catalyst or triggers in different ways. Sometimes things are such a trigger that they just immediately go into their shell like a turtle. And so it depends really what's going on. But I do totally agree that ideally we can say this is a temporary thing, like this too shall pass. We're okay, and the thing is that if I'm in that state of self-protection and like closedness, and you say that to me, it just bounces off the shell along with everything else. So I don't hear it, right? So it doesn't reassure me. I don't care, basically. In those moments, I don't care what people are saying or doing. I'm isolated. I'm alone.
Yeah.
Right? I'm an island, sort of. Yeah. And so what people say or do becomes sort of irrelevant, because that's the only way that that's the method that I built to protect my energy, protect myself.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to let go of that. And so it's challenging if you have that type of situation that I have when, and I don't know if it's a masculine thing or if it's what it is, or if it's just something that children who grew up, like I consider myself as sort of an indigo, children that grew up as an indigo are, tend to exhibit these traits, and tend to be very, very, very good at just throwing walls, like emotional walls up to protect themselves, and basically sort of deadening themselves in many ways when things get too traumatic or remind them of previous trauma. And it's sort of like a protection mechanism that isn't the healthiest. Once we realize it, though, we can move through it.
Yeah. I do think as much as possible, fostering that eternal bridge between two partners, no matter what is going on, can really be the missing link to move through these tricky situations with a lot more harmony, peace, and hope.
Yeah.
We termed our whole interaction over those 24 hours a nightmare.
It was.
For me, it felt like a nightmare because it felt like that bridge had collapsed.
I thought I didn't understand the whole world anymore. Like I was literally, I don't even know what was going on. I was like, what is happening? It was really hard. And
so corollary to this point of having the bridge is, I love this little phrase, lead from your heart, not from your hurt. Which really is saying, like, can we be vulnerable? Can we remain open-hearted even when, oh my gosh, it's just so hard? So for instance, for me, I could have led more from my heart and not my hurt when I was texting with you Saturday night. Instead of bringing in this whole story I had, I could have just texted, I feel sad that you didn't call. Could you just call me? I could have just said that. And I want to be able to be more vulnerable like that.
And
say that.
And I should say as well that I could have just quickly called you right in the morning and said, there's no problem here. Everything's okay. Thank you for sharing. I'm going to call you back later. We'll talk about it all. I could have been... But my stories were coming up about how I had to defend myself all the time, about how, all this type of stuff that people always just project this stuff on me. And then I have to defend it and like help them see that I'm not the way they think I am. And all these types of things. And so I was like a little frustrated and defensive. So I was acting from my hurt as well. Even in trying to
Right.
write the note, I was trying to do it compassionately and stuff. But the only reason I was being so, mind oriented, rational with it, and like careful and everything, was because I wasn't in the heart really. I was acting defensively. Like all I really had to do is just say, you know, just call you quickly and say those things, and it probably would have diffused
Yeah,
everything, um,
exactly. Yeah.
and and that type of thing. But because I was so like hindered in my ability to express what was going on for me, because I was in my own story from what was
Right.
going on, I basically,
Yes.
I didn't do that, and then it helped your stories build, and
Right.
things got worse on both sides, and our stories just both started to come up more and more.
Yeah.
And
And
it was perfect because I don't know about you, but I feel a lot lighter today, a lot better after we've moved through it all.
yeah, I feel much better. And I feel those types of very painful, intense situations, we end up learning so much because it was so painful. Because it was so painful, we end up taking the time to do the self reflection and to do the conversation between us. So I don't think we even need to look at these as negative experiences. I don't
Right.
think we have to look at them as negative experiences. I think we can look at them as experiences. um and I love the phrase, like, there are no failures, there are only experiences. So I don't
Yeah.
think we have to count
And
it as a failure. I think
totally.
what we count it as, it's just training ground,
I don't.
it's a dojo.
Yeah, I'd like to say that experience itself is all neutral.
Exactly.
The only meaning that ever has anything, or any experience ever has, is the meaning that we apply to it, and innately the experience is neutral. Now it that can be a little bit confusing, but basically, some people will look at a red car, just to keep it very simple. Some people will look at a red car and think, I love red cars, that's a great car. Other people will look at a red car and go, oh my god, that's an ugly red car, I don't like red cars. Maybe they were hit by a red car when they were a kid, or maybe it has nothing to do with anything, it's just a preference. But the point is that our preference, our bias, or our narratives inform how we perceive the experience. And that's what we mean when we say we project our consciousness onto things as a mirror. So we project our consciousness onto the car and say, I don't like this car. And that's sort of an aspect of self that we're saying, I don't really like. I don't really like the color red. I don't like red cars. And it seems silly, but the red car is you. And you're saying, I don't like red cars. I don't like the color red. Most likely you have a distortion in your root chakra, or red ray energy center, and this is a symbolic representation of why you don't like red, stuff like that. But anyways, the reason I'm saying that is because once we like realize that, oh, each thing that's happening is actually neutral, and I'm either distorting it to a positive experience, or I'm distorting it to a negative experience, depending on what I feel I need to learn, what my higher self feels I need to learn. Then you're like, oh, so it's not that we directly control the projection. We review the projection and experience it. But then we get to choose, like, does the reflection that I'm seeing align with my heart, or is it a negative story and negative thing that isn't truly real? And can I just either make it neutral, or can I make it positive? And we have that, and then so the next time that reflection comes, it's neutral or positive. It's not charged with all that negativity.
Yeah. And for me personally, and we're gonna, I think, summarize the nine tips in just
Yeah, we've
a
kind of been
second.
all over, but
Yeah, but
that's what happens. It's
for
live.
me, I feel we have 9 amazing tips to ensure a lot more harmony in conversations. And I'm actually going to print it out and keep these 9 tips on my desk near me. And if we have another tricky little situation and stuff is coming up for me, I am going to look at these 9 steps. I am these feel very, very important to me. And I don't want to co-create what we created the last time. So the treasure of going through the situation with you is, it was really painful. I saw a lot of what I was doing. Perhaps you did as well. And now we've got some like really juicy, helpful ways to do better the next time, and
Totally.
to share these with other people. So would it be okay if right now we go through
Yeah,
all the
I think we
next
should
steps?
summarize and probably close out. Yeah.
Okay. So top tips for communicating like a master. Number one, self-reflection. Which includes, I would say, feeling all of your feelings, like the inner work we're talking about, like feel all of your feelings. Usually feeling the feelings is good for that to go first, because on the tail end of that, you'll be a lot more grounded and balanced, so that you'll have more ability to be clear about what I was doing and maybe what stories I was bringing in. So I think number one is like inner work, self-reflection. Do you want to say number two?
Yeah. Stick to the facts, ma'am. I like the ma'am at the end. Try to be as objectively clear and have clarity with just what's happened. Not what do I think might be happening, or what do I think could be happening, or what evidence do I have of different feelings that they may have, but what has occurred here. And so like Tassel said in our example, it seemed like I didn't call. She had asked me to, and that made her sad. Once we know that's sort of the objective truth, then we can just sort of ask ourselves, well, am I seeing this right? Like, maybe I should just ask them if they, what they were doing or what this is about. Why? Maybe I should just say, why haven't you called me yet? Right? Like, you said you were going to call and you haven't. Why haven't you? Tell me. All right. And we can be direct and
ask for what you want.
Yeah.
That's a learning for me too.
And if you have a confidence and a trust with your partner that, everyone's trying their best and stuff, then the direct question is, people can be quite sensitive to those, right? Like, why didn't you call? You said you were going to call and you didn't. And can be quite sensitive to that type of sentence. So it's important to recognize where your partner is, how they respond to types of talking and stuff too. But because when I'm asked, why didn't you? I'm like, I don't know. Why didn't I do billions of things that I didn't do? Right? Like I don't know how to frame that. So I get frustrated with that. But I guess my point is that if you stick to the facts, you can sort of see just precisely what happened, and then try to not let the other stuff muddy it up or confuse it and turn it into something don't let it grow.
Keep it clean. Keep it pure. Just stick to the bare facts and not embellish it with any type of story. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. The third tip is, as much as possible, keep your precious heart open. Lead from your heart, not from your hurt. Allow yourself to be vulnerable. The worst case scenario is you're met with something that feels hurtful. That can happen. But to me, that's a better path, because at least you are doing your best. At least you are showing up. If you're closed down and you're leading from your hurt, you're only contributing to the problem. You're only going to make it worse. So all we can do is work on our own behavior, really. So yeah, you might sometimes you might get hurt with an open heart. It's true, but you can handle it, and you can take a lot of comfort and pride that I'm showing up the best I can. I'm doing everything I can here.
Yeah. And the next one is active listening, validating and empathizing. So the Imago technique, more or less. Like, try to hold, that's actually the next one, but try to listen to what your partner is experiencing. Know that their experience is real. Even if you're aware that they're in some type of story, it is real. It's no, like, emotion is never, sometimes real and sometimes not real. It's always real. It's always, especially in very high intensity emotion, like, it can feel horrible, right? And so you never want to minimize how they're feeling or anything like that. And basically, if you know they're in a kind of a narrative, just try to keep yourself remembering, like, I'm not doing this stuff. I appreciate she's feeling this way or he's feeling this way, but and when the time feels right, I may broach this with them. But for now, I just have to hold compassion, let them express their pain, and try to empathize and be curious around why they are hurt. And, if you know them really well and know a lot of their stories, it's going to be pretty clear when that's happening, and what's going on and why it hurts so much. And then you can be compassionate and just say, it's kind of sucks that they're going through that, right?
I one of my favorite words these days is curiosity.
Yeah,
So
curiosity.
Even when you're pretty sure they're in a story, well, still be curious about their story that they're in, because then you will help them unravel it. If you try to resist their story when they're in it, it's only going to get worse.
I always ask, yeah. Oh, sorry. I always ask myself, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
I just want to say, like, even if pretty much they're in a story, still be curious about their story, because it will help them unravel their story. The only way out of it is through it. They're going to have to just play it all out until it's unraveled. So the best thing we can do, if we're able to hold the space to do it, is tell me how you're feeling. Tell me what you experienced. Tell me about the story that you're seeing here. You can call it out. Tell me about the story you see here.
Exactly.
Be curious. Like, basically lean into it. Lean into whatever is happening, not lean away or resist it. Lean it, go right in. The next tip is holding space, which in a way is kind of the umbrella term for what we just talked about. I love this idea of, okay, we're in a difficult situation. I have a lot of feelings that are coming up. I can see maybe I'm going to go into some stories. Okay, I've got all my stuff coming up over here. Can I still hold space as well for my partner? Can I do both? This is masterful. And I think this is what we all are absolutely capable of. Can I deal with my own stuff, my own hurt, my own stories, my own triggers, my own frustration, my own, I can't believe this is happening, and simultaneously hold space too? Wow, this is pretty impressive.
Yeah. And then we have sharing conversation intentions, or, so I think this is sort of part of the Imago technique that we're probably thinking of a way to add it in. We probably will sort of adjust the technique, and I'm guessing make a video or a course perhaps on it, where we put, we focus a little bit. We still focus on expressing the story and this experience and, like, highlighting how everything happened, but we take some time now to talk about what people were trying to do with what they were saying, what they did, some of the reasons that they did what they did, to help see through some of the falsities that have caused some of the feelings around, like, what's going on. So if somebody feels like someone ignored them, for example, but that's not what happened, then of course, if the person just says, it felt like you ignored me, it felt like this, it felt like that, then the other person's like, but I wasn't doing that, right? And so to give both sides a sort of chance, and I think we'll turn this into a course, or, like, expand on the Imago technique, because I don't think Imago really encompasses this aspect, and I think we're noticing it's really important.
Yeah, absolutely. I love it. The next tip is how to help your partner if they are struggling, if they are in a big story, if they are in their wounds. And this is just where that like sort of unconditional acceptance, unconditional love, holding space comes in. Can you take this higher ground? You may be struggling with the situation, but can you just hold a container of love and compassion around both of you if the other person is struggling, and to not resist, to not make them wrong in that moment, to not tell them this is not happening. It's really just to be gentle, to be accepting, to be flowing with what's happening, and really just to have faith that this is going to work out. I know my partner will most likely unravel this on their own. I'm just here. I'm just going to be, can we be a loving presence? I really love that phrase. Can we be a loving presence while obviously our partner is just struggling? They're in pain. So can we give them love?
Yeah. And that adds to the next tip that we have, which is blanket of grace. So can we just be graceful in receiving comments about things that happen that maybe we don't feel we did, or we don't feel happened that way, and but can we respect that that's what they've experienced and that that's just as real? Can we like just give ourselves grace as well in it, and give patience to ourselves and peace around how it feels for us in the situation, like respecting that, yeah, it's hard for us to, like Tassel said, be masterful and hold space for other people's hurt while we're hurting. It's a courageous thing to bother to do that. Not everyone feels bothered to be that type of person, right? So give yourself a sort of pat on the back, and also just like understand that it can be wobbly, it can be difficult sometimes and challenging, but that it always gets better. And just give grace, be graceful, as much as you can.
And what's coming through me right now, I'm getting huge chills, is these are our initiations, our expansions into more fully embodying our God self.
Yeah.
As we know that Spirit, Mother, Father, God holds unconditional love, unconditional.
Think of all the whining,
compassion.
all the whining we do to God, right? And God never goes, I don't, shut up. Oh, God.
So with ourselves, when we're struggling, and with our partner, when they're struggling, can we be our God self, which we are God, we're all fractals of the infinite creator. Can we more fully embody our God self in these moments? And this is just great expansion for us to be able to do that.
Absolutely.
Okay, 2 last points.
Oh, we have more?
Yeah.
My list doesn't have those 2.
Not on your list.
Okay,
I added them as we were talking about it. Okay, the 2 last points are, can we maintain this bridge between us no matter what is going on? So we both might be super triggered in our wounds and our stories, but can we still have a bridge? So, and even if we have to take a break from the talking, which is fine, but when we take the break, can we communicate something about the bridge? Like, I got to go now. It's a bit too much for me, but I love you. You're very important to me. And I want to work this out. So just always that bridge.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last point, I'll just say it because I know you don't have it, is on the tail end of all of this, coming together and doing any repair work that might be helpful in the relationship, and just like an overall debriefing of what happened. And usually this would take place, maybe a few days later. Like, this is what has happened for us. We've actually, in a way, been talking about what happened over the weekend all week, because it was a really big deal. And even I think one of the loveliest questions you could ask your partner is there any repair that you need from me because of maybe how you felt hurt in our interactions? Is there any way I can help you. Is there some repair that needs to be talked about and perhaps initiated? I just think that's a lovely question. Like, do you have any outstanding fears or triggers about what happened? Is there anything left to clean up?
Yeah.
Basically, like, just can we just clean it all up and make sure we're all good? Because one of the worst things I think we can do in a relationship is not clean things up, and whether we have some resentments or wounds that we are not sharing, or we're not maybe open to the other person sharing their stuff, this just breeds chaos and bitterness and hurt, which over the longevity of a relationship is not going to be good. So this last step of any type of further communication, repair, debriefing, I think is also really helpful.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's it for today. Thanks for watching. If you liked the video, click the like button, really helps out. And if you want to subscribe, that'd be great too. We have Patreon down, links below to join that. We have our first course going on December, or on Friday. On December. That reminds me of Kai saying he wanted to go to Christmas yesterday, my son. Anyways, if you're interested in that, check that out. We'll be doing a course on how to create your
roadmap to your dreams.
There it is.
Yep.
It's coming together quite nicely. It should be quite good, and we'll be doing that together on Fridays. So we appreciate all of you, and hope you have an awesome day.
So much love to everybody.